Hello and welcome, my name is Colin, and this is an assembly tutorial for my Pen F to Nikon F adapter found on my Thingiverse. Alright, to start off we're going to need 7 M3x6 button head bolts, one of which we will file the side off of a little bit to avoid interfering with the Nikon lens aperture ring. Next we're going to be using a nail as our lock pin. This one is about 1.8 millimeters in diameter, but the length shouldn't matter because we'll be cutting it to a different length later. Next we'll be using a pen spring about 4 millimeters in diameter. For 3D printed parts, we start with the locking pin, and this one I'd highly recommend fabricating out of metal, but I'm demonstrating with the printed one because that's what I've provided. After that we have the aperture bypass lifter, the main body of the adapter, the Nikon F mount, and finally the Olympus Pen F mount. For required tools, we'll be using a 2mm Allen bit and a small metal file. Alright, to start we're going to take the main body of the lens and place the aperture bypass lifter in the designated slot. You can see it slides freely there. And it's important to note that the aperture bypass lifter goes on the opposite side of the lock pin for the Nikon F mount. So make sure that you have it right way around, otherwise you might accidentally put your lens on upside down. And it's important also that the filed screw head goes next to the indicator for the Nikon F mount, as I've found that that's where the interference always happens. But other than that, you can pretty much just screw the Nikon F mount into the body of the lens adapter. Now that the Nikon F mount is screwed tightly onto the body of the lens adapter, it's important to make sure that the aperture bypass lifter moves freely in its track, otherwise it can cause some binding issues later. It's also a good idea right now to test it and make sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. Alright, now we can flip it over and mount the Pen F mount onto the body of the adapter. Make sure the flat spot on the Pen F mount lines up with the lock pin hole on the body of the adapter. Alright, now we can put it on the camera itself and test the fitment. You'll notice on the model an indent where it aligns with the bayonet, and I filled this in with some red filament, but it's not a necessary step. I just find it to be a little bit more visible. Now we come to the installation of the spring, and I unfortunately don't have extra springs to demonstrate making one, but pretty much you just put it in and then cut it to the right length, and then you bend some of the spring towards the center of it so that the lock pin has something to sit on. I made the lock pin a little bit oversized in the file so that you can file it down to just the right size. The fitment of this is really important, so I wanted to give folks more opportunity for adjustment. If it doesn't slide smoothly back and forth in its slot, then you need to file it down a bit more. In addition to that, the part of the pin that indexes with the camera is also a bit long, so that needs to be filed to the correct length, and you should hear a click. Just like that. Alright, now we come to the lock pin, and this is another one of those times where it kind of depends on your system, but basically you want to bottom out the pin in the adapter, and it should stick out no more than 2 millimeters from the surface. Any longer than that and the pin might not seat properly and it won't stay put. It's also a good idea to file down where the cut was made so you're not leaving sharp edges anywhere. The pin that I cut came out to about 12.5 millimeters. Alright, now's the time to test it. If the pin pops out, you might need to file it down a little bit more so it sits flush. Alright, it's finally time to put all the pieces together and see if they all work. If everything goes to plan, you should have a finished Nikon F to Pen F adapter. I've been using this adapter for a couple months and it works really well, but I have some improvements that I'd like to make, and I'd like to find an alternative to the nail because it's not my favorite thing, but yeah, there you have it. Please feel free to ask questions in the comments and stay tuned for future updates to this model. Thanks for watching!